Good afternoon, ladies and gents. And you join me at a real historical gem, the Church of St Dunstan's and All Saints in Stepney. There's been a church on this site since the 6th century, in Saxon times. That was a wooden chapel. That was then refounded by St Dunstan himself in the 950s. But the church we see today is mainly 15th century, with its chancel being 12th century. And there's a 19th century porch and octagonal church building just there added on. But yeah, it's pretty much original 15th century and 12th century chancel. But inside the church is a remnant of St Dunstan and his time from his original stone church that he founded in the 950s. So that'll be an interesting thing for us to all see. Yeah, it's a beautiful one, this one. You can see up there you've got gargoyles and all sorts. There you go. Church clock. And the church porch. You'll see more of that in a minute. There's we're going to go round and get some side views of the church now. And there's more of these gargoyles up there, look. There is a churchyard tour that follows this as well. And interestingly enough, because there's quite a few famous and very well known or rich people buried in this church, or churchyard, we've actually got a few images of some of the people. So you get the churchyard tour, then at the end of it you'll get an image of this man, then there's someone who's over there, and different people from different eras, religious figures and rich merchant or shipbuilders mostly for the main part. And then you'll get some images of the churchyard as it was years ago. It was gravestones or headstones. Some of the English, we call them gravestones, some call them headstones, and a lot of our American friends call them tombstones. Either each or which can be used. But yeah, there was a lot more of those headstones in the cemetery in those days. Like a lot of London churches and churchyards, they clear a lot of it away as time went on, because it makes it easier for the mowers to clean, to mow and keep the churchyard clean and tidy. Quite how the people who would have paid an awful lot of money for their graves and gravestones feel about that, we do not know. Got another gargoyle up there, look. And there. We come round to the back part of the church, where its chancel and high altar is. Oh, I do say, I hope he's not dead. Very sunny around this side. This is the Victorian Octagonal building, added in the 1870s. With its newer looking gargoyles and stuff like that. But they've done a tidy enough job of it. Yeah, so I'll allow it. And as I say, at the end of the video, this video, you're going to get some images of the church as it was years ago. And then if you watch the churchyard one, you'll get some images of the, I think it's about 3 or 4, it might be 3, just 3 3 or 4 of the people that are buried in the churchyard, which I'm not always able to do because I don't cover cemeteries that often, because filming in UK cemeteries is tricky. It isn't encouraged and isn't allowed unless you get permission. With churchyards, they stopped burying in them in the 1850s in London for the most part. So as long as you nip into the church and ask, and they're usually pretty easy going with it. That's why I mostly cover old churchyards, because it doesn't step on any toes. And of course with cemeteries, there are a lot of recent things in there, and that's people's loved ones and privacy, which you don't want to intrude on, really, do you? I mean, if I'm in a cemetery and I'm able to film things 1930s or older, I'll go for, but I do try to avoid newer ones unless I've got an okay for it. There we are, the Octagonal building. Fair trade organic coffee. It also has a big food bank, this church. They do a lot for the local community, which is nice. Gosh, it's frightfully warm. Should walk you back round to the front. See if Maggie's still there or not. Maggie, she's lovely, but she does not wish to appear on film. It's to do with her work that she does outside of the church. I won't say no more than that. This is an interesting tomb, and this is our first man that we get an image of when you watch the churchyard live. It's a restored tomb, 1600s. There we are, and we shall be off inside the church, so join me outside there and we'll go in. And in we go. Lovely old church of St Dunstan, Stepney. We've covered our exterior views. I always cover the inside of a church first, you see, and do the exterior views afterwards. But yeah, it still flies the red pennant, being a once classed as a church of the high seas. So, yeah. But look, you've got the above the doorway, look, so you know it's maritime links. I'll just point this way. Get the overnight bus empty bag, you know, and you leave here about 11:30.
Steve, George.
There's the original font. The font is Norman, with a remodelled bowl, and it was moved here later on in time. But interestingly enough, for me, on a more personal link, these out. These are baptism records. So you've got christenings, St Dunstan Stepney, 1768. We're in August there. Then we go over to September. Then you've got my ancestor, who is Mary, daughter of William Smith of Mile End Old Town, butcher, and Mary. That's when she was christened, on the 4th of September, in that font. Then the second one is later on, they become a bit more detailed by this time. 1815. And you've got February the 5th, 1815. And he was born on June the 18th, 1814. Joseph, son of James and Mary Ann Foster. They came from Poplar, because by this time Poplar didn't have its own church, not till 1817. The father's occupation was a labourer, so that's an interesting little snippet. And the second one is a marriage entry, but we'll save that till we get to the high altar, the chancel.
Cheers, Sarah. Oh, yeah, you're right. I know they moved it now, haven't they? They moved the trailer down further.
Oh, that's because they were filming, so they had to get their lights. So the BBC took over for 3.5 days.
Oh, was it fun, was it?
I tell you what, being an actor's really boring.
Nine of my ancestors were christened in this one in all, but these were just the ones I chose to highlight today because they were direct ancestors and ancestresses, like grandfather, grandmother links. This church has got some really nice stained glass. That's the arms of the Guild of Coopers and Barrel Makers. And look at the age of that door, look. And the lock and everything on it. Don't you just love things like that? The age of that. And look at the thickness of the door, look. It's just a storage area in there because they there's a big food bank in here. They do an awful lot for the local community in this church, so bear that in mind. There we are. There are memorials up on the wall, quite a few of them. Near the entrance of the western porch of this church lies interred the body of Alexander Weller Esquire. Sorry. Of Stewart Street, Old Artillery Ground, citizen and silk thrower, one of His Majesty's Justice of the Peace. He was a good husband and tender parent and true friend. He lived respected and died much lamented on the 10th of November 1734, aged 68. That's a pretty good age for those days. The average life expectancy in London, and particularly the East End of London, was about 45. And up there, look, you've got more lovely stained glass. Worshipful Company of Coopers.
When I put my hand forward, I can see it, but it's like there's something stuck.
If you go on to there, by the Mercers and Vintners and Coopers Companies, were unveiled by the Right Honourable Duke of Gloucester KG and dedicated by Juice Lord Bishop of Stepney, 17th of December 1953. There we are. And we'll point you up because there are some people in front of me, so I don't like filming people without their consent. Lady Jane Neville. The entire thing there is in Latin.
Yeah.
I know she was Lady Jane Neville, and she died in November 1606. So the rest of it I can't tell you about because it's in Latin. The Worshipful Company of Mercers. I mean, as you know, I love old churches anyway. They're most of the things I cover on my page. But this one obviously has got such personal links because it's linked to my ancestors. This is a fascinating piece of this church's history. The wall of Carthage. This is a piece of Carthage wall that was brought back by one of the mariners many years ago. Of Carthage wall I was a stone. All mortals read with pity. Time consumes, all it spareth none. Man, mountain, town, nor city. Therefore, all mortals now bethink you whereunto you must, since now such stately buildings be buried in the dust. Thomas Hughes, 1663. And then you've got rectors, which starts over there. I'll cover that in a second. Henry Leach. Pause to read any of the inscriptions. See, look, this is what fascinates me as well. Things like this, that obviously leads up into there, whatever it would have been back in the original day. This church is mostly 15th century, with a 13th century chancel. But look, that goes up there. So don't forget, most of these places would have been monastic back in the old days. I'm not going to point you down too much because there are people in front of me, but look at the beams and everything. It's really nice. Everyone's back's turned, that's it. We can catch the window, there we are. Can't point you down too much. And what's nice to see as well is proper original wooden pews. List of rectors of Stepney. William, 1233. That's when the first recorded vicars began, but there's been a church on this site for well over 1,000 years. Wooden Chapel, then refounded by St Dunstan in the 950s. And there's something in this church that links us right to St Dunstan himself, and we're going to go and see that soon. I always saved the high altar till last, as you know. Underneath lies interred the body of Captain Nathaniel Owen of Mile End Green, who departed this life February the 2nd, in the 67th year of his age, in the year of our Lord 1708. Also the body of Mary, his first wife, who departed this life August the 6th, in the 36th year of her age, in the year of our Lord 1685. Now these are interesting because the parish records for this place are all online on familysearch.org, and this parish, for certain periods over its history, they had very detailed records. You'd obviously get a clerk or a curate or someone who was very detailed, and it writes about his first wife that she died in childbed, so she would have died of some sort of childbirthing complication. Near this place lies the body of Mrs. Bridget Owen, wife of Captain Nathaniel Owen, who departed this life ye 16th of March 1709, aged 63 years. So himself and his second wife lived to a pretty good age, but the first wife died in childbed. Which means that with this parish, that she probably died in labour, because if it had been something like paraffle fever, what we call preeclampsia, they seem to mark down that as childbed fever. That's what they called it in those days. And there are quite a few women in these parish records that have childbed fever, and she's just died in childbed. Awful as it sounds, things like that could have been a complication. The baby was breech or got stuck and couldn't come out, and no successful cesareans in those days. Pause to read any of the inscriptions. These are scenes from the life and the crucifixion of Christ, and I'll cover those last probably because I want to do them in order. Found out a lot more about this church, so a bit too blurry, I'm afraid. This phone's good, but not that good. And this, look. See, I'll be honest with you, ladies and gents, this is my second trip here and second time off filming the actual inside of the church too. I was given a guidebook when I came last time and didn't really read it properly until I got home. And something I'm going to have to stop doing because you discover so many details in it. Oh, damn, I missed that. And so I'll scrap the first one and come back because, you know, I do like to try and do a place justice if I can. Here's the pulpit. And I'm deliberately not facing you to the high altar because that I want to save till last. And as you have in every Church of England, you've got the royal arms, the coat of arms of the royal family. Being a Church of England church, the monarch being the head of the church, their arms always hangs up high in the church. Oops, pressed the wrong one. To get that really big zoom in working very well, you have to be outside, preferably. This may be a longish one, so in it to win it, ladies and gents. I could part one and part two it, I suppose, but see, with ones over 35 minutes and 30 something seconds, as you know, I have trouble with it because it mutes the sound. So anything longer than that I generally have to put on YouTube. And these here, we do have our St Dunstan Stepney guidebook with us. Something. Here we are. And I find them. These are my family history documents. Here we go, I can see them right towards the back. Sideman's staves from the 1830s. And that's what these are. I'll give you a detailed look at them. Some have got VR and some have got GR. See, look, I won't dare touch them, of course, but that's VR for Victoria Regina, GR there, so that would have been it's George the Fourth. So WR, so that's King William, and then directly after that, King William, you had Queen Victoria. George the Fourth, that one. GIV, the IV is the fourth. And VR. So you got Victorian and Georgian ones there. 1830s. Over here is a cabinet and some coffin props. They did have a funeral. Coffin rests. For over 10 years, the monochrome details within and without this fine old church serves as a perfect framework to my high colour interpretations These signed original watercolours. With window card mounted for any for your choice, £40 each. Oh, you can buy these, look. 40 quid each. Oh, good lord. But yeah, here's a cabinet with historical items inside. The church was damaged in the Second World War, windows blown out, so pretty much all of the glass was post-war replacements, and they managed to piece some little bits and pieces back together. To the rector of Stepney, for the time being, Anne. What's that? To the rector of Stepney, for the time being, Anne, daughter of Captain Robert and Mrs. Grace Elder, bequeathed £5 a year to keep her family tomb in substantial and decent repair. She died on Christmas Day 1811. So Anne, the daughter of Captain Robert and Mrs. Grace Elder, bequeathed £5 a year. Then you've got to the memory of Anne Moore, wife of Captain John Moore, died 3rd of June 1804, aged 27 years, at Demerary, South America. And this one here is an old medieval one from, you know those stone coffins that I showed you in some of our restless royal corpses? Back in those days, that would be set into the floor, and this would be laid on top, the lid, and that would literally be your burial. You'd be level with the floor, people may walk on you, but the most significant part of that would have been the smell. That's after the Burials Act and thing, they put in a lot of regulations that you had to bury 6 feet, and they banned burials in London churches after 1851, I think it was. You get a lot of detail there. I don't want to show you too much, obviously, because I'm saving the high altar till last. John Berry, and it's all in Latin. And he died on the 14th of February 1689, Baptistus, so that's either born or baptised, I'm not quite sure which. 7th of January 1635. '54. And there he is himself. He looks like a slightly chubbier version of Samuel Pepys, if I'm honest with you. No disrespect to this man or Samuel Pepys. Anyone that knows me knows that Samuel Pepys is my favourite historical Londoner, so hopefully this gentleman might take that as a compliment. Collect my things. Then you've got a gallery up there. Bell Tower visits, they do, but only on open day. So we'll have to wait for open day for that. And then you've got the organ there. And there's more sideman staves over here as well. George the Fourth. George the Fourth. George the Fourth. George the Fourth. George the Fourth and George the Fourth. So they're all King George the Fourth. And his reign was from 1820 to 1830. Then you had his brother, King William, 1830 to 1837. And then Queen Victoria. See, the uncles of Queen Victoria, they were the sons of Mad King George and Queen Charlotte. And it was known as the race of the princes. They all had lots of illegitimate children, but none of them had legitimate ones. So they all rapidly started getting married and trying to sire heirs. George IV did sire a female heir that should have been the queen. She should have been what Queen Victoria became. Princess Charlotte, but she died in childbirth as well, and it was a national tragedy. Like, people really mourned. And then the Duke of Cumberland, Queen Victoria's father, he had Queen Victoria. He died, I think it was either actually before she was born or very shortly afterwards. This window was unveiled by Admiral of the Fleet, Lord Cunningham of Hindthorpe, Knight, and dedicated by the Lord Bishop of Portsmouth, 13th of February 1951, in thanksgiving of the men of the sea, 1939-45. Yes, and we do owe them a great deal of thanks, don't we? In memory of Mr. Nicholas Dixon, who departed this life 9th of April 1818, aged 61 years. Also, Mrs. Elizabeth Ann Dixon, wife of the above Mr. Nicholas Dixon, who departed this life 20th of November 1823, aged 60 years. Then you've got Hugonie James, which is Hugo James. I don't know when he died because the whole thing's in Latin. More big pews there. In memory of John Charrington, Esquire, who was many years resident in this parish. He died the 9th of December 1815, aged 77. Anyone that remembers Charrington Breweries, this man was Charrington Breweries. Also, Catherine, his relict, which is his widow, died the 13th of December 1815, aged 68 years. They were interred in the same day in the family vault at their native place, Aldenham in Hertfordshire. Because if you notice, look, John Charrington died on the 9th of December 1815, and his wife died on the 13th of December. So literally within 4 days of each other. From what I can gather, because the parish records, they were going for a period of not massively detailed, but from at the top of the page for these burials and the 2 pages after it, nearly at the top of every one, it's got cholera and then ditto, and like right down the lot. And there was about 150 people buried that died of cholera, so these 2 were probably taken out by a cholera epidemic. The East End, this was in the countryside in those days, but they suffered very badly from cholera, and it spread quickly, so did a lot of diseases. Some diseases, it may not have been cholera, it might have been something they didn't understand. The symptoms were similar to cholera, so they called it cholera. In memory of Lieutenant Harold Charrington, Royal Navy, aged 26 years, of Her Majesty's ship Euralius. Flag Lieutenant to the Rear Admiral, Sir W.H. Hewitt, KCB, Victoria Cross, Commander-in-Chief of the East Indies, who with Professor Edward Palmer of the University of Cambridge and Captain W.J. Gill, Royal Engineers, whilst engaged on a confidential mission in the desert of Mount Sinai, Arabia, in connection with the war in Egypt, were all killed by Bedouin Arabs on the 11th of August 1882. Their remains are interred in the crypt of St Paul's Cathedral. He was the second son of Spencer Charrington, Esquire, of this parish, and the great-grandson of John and Catherine Charrington. A tablet has been erected in this parish church, in the parish church of Hudson Hearts, by the Admiral and officers of his flagship Euralius, in affectionate remembrance of a gallant sailor and one who had endeared himself to them all. So this is what I say, when you go to a church, you don't just discover the church, you get its history and all the people connected with it too. Captain Michael Morrill, Merriall, Merial, and Claire, his wife, eldest daughter of the above named Elizabeth Statute, Startute, have erected this monument as a testimony of her, spelled H-I-R, virtue, and their love. This life is a warfare. Come, Lord Jesus, come quickly. Revelation 22. And these are the people. Can we read that? Know that my Redeemer liveth, and that I shall rise out of the earth in the last days. Job 19. Oh, that's a shame. It's worn away, the inscription. That. I'll pause you a minute and check, see if they're in my guidebook. Unfortunately, they're not in my guidebook. I always like to look and imagine what these people may have been like, and to think, did the sculptor, craftsman or woman who created these monuments, did they know the person in life, what they looked like? And are these lifelike depictions, or as the Tudors would call it, lively? The British Institute of Organ Studies, the organ in St Dunstan, Stepney, has been awarded a certificate of Grade 2 in recognition of its being a good instrument by Henry Willis, 1872, made for St Augustine, Augustine, installed of electric action NP, Manda, 1971. It is therefore listed in the Institute's Register of Historic Pipe Organs, and being an instrument of importance to the national heritage and one deserving of careful preservation for the benefit of future generations. June 13th, 2009. And you can see, look, it's, on my bucket list before I die is to be able to play a church organ. But I've played a harmonium one at Barking, which is in their church room kind of thing, but not an actual church organ itself. Most of them are listed, insured, and a lot of the insurance generally only covers one person to touch or play them, things like that. So yeah, you've got to respect that, haven't you? It's not a toy, and I am an amateur. Even I say that I am an amateur player. So to touch something like that, I mean, look, you've got all these, the bass things and everything and whatnot. I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin with those ones. I could play the keyboard quite happily, but not the bass. This one could be near on an hour by the time I've done the outside views and things like that. Joseph Sums, Esquire. And that one. Member of Parliament for the Dartmouth. Departed this life June. Oh, it's all in Latin anyway. Hate that when they do that. And this here, I've got this in my guidebook. I'll just put the guidebook down and I'll show you the bit I'm on about. I know it's here somewhere because I saw it. here it is, last page more or less, and that is, right, a triptych rescued from the church of St Augustine's, Settle Street, during the Blitz. So we're going to have a look at that now. And in here you've got the Roll of Honour for the dead of World War I and II. And this is the triptych. And these are like picture books, especially from the real old days when a lot of people they were illiterate, they couldn't read and write. Many of these told a story. And with these ones, I'm told that a lot of the craftsmen that would have made them would have been illiterate as well, which is an interesting thing to think. And got this panel here. The cover for the font there, look. And this is the Roll of Honour. I'll just move this flag aside. Ypres 2018. Two of my great-grandfathers were at Ypres. Arthur William Price, my nan's dad, and Thomas Henry Williams, my granddad's dad. Ypres and Flanders was my great-granddad Price. He was gassed 3 times with mustard gas and invalided out in the end because no longer fit for service. Yeah. Some of them, I'm afraid, are a bit hard to see. They're a bit worn. I always like to try and cover them if I can, because many of us acknowledge that we owe our freedom and lives to these people. I don't hero worship many people, but these ladies and gentlemen I do. Anyone that gives their life in the service of their country, hopefully trying to end and get rid of evil rather than starting it, you've got to take your hats off to them, haven't you? And even the ones that are in evil countries, some of them soldiers, they got called up like our boys did, and a lot of them had no choice in the matter. There were the evil ones amongst them, we all know that, but, well, that's my outlook on it anyway. And please God, such a thing never happens again, although it is, isn't it? So. Wootton, look, 2 there. No, sorry, it's 1, isn't it? William Wootton, that's Woolley. Woolley, I've heard that name before from somewhere. I think one of my page members is called Woolley. I've got the surname of Woolley. Someone I've interacted with over on my page, or someone else's, has got the surname of Woolley. If you have, I wonder if this is one of your descendants, your ancestors, of which you've got every right to be proud. That forward ceiling, look. That would have been a room where the church silver and things were stored years ago. Look at the great brackets for the big hinged door. Like over there, they mirror each other. Safe rooms and churches, and in those days churches held a lot of wealth, particularly before the Reformation. When Henry VIII, he took the Reformation so far, but getting rid of all the wealth, the gold, the pomp and that was the work of his son Edward, and then later on through Elizabeth and further on Cromwell and such like. Before the Reformation, churches were very colourful, rich with scent and smell and noise and sound. These here, they very much mirror the kind of seats that are called misericords that monks would sit on during their breaks in between prayers and chanting. You can see carved details. And this is the back side of the organ. And as I say, I always shave high altar till last, so we'll be doing that in a minute. Joseph Jewison Cooper Esquire, late quartermaster of the 30 Light, died at Hastings, 5th May 1836. After serving his regiment for 21 years, he took part in the suppression of the Indian Mutiny and New Zealand War. Oh dear. Not a nice fellow, I'm afraid. This tablet is erected by his brother officers as a token of their esteem and regard. Yeah, the people of India and New Zealand certainly wouldn't have erected it, that's for sure. The Indian Mutiny was the people wanting their country back, which obviously they had every right to want back. I mean, I know we did some I don't know, I'm going to say we did some good, I don't know. I wasn't there, and a lot of what we read and are told is pretty bad, isn't it? You know, back to the font again. Look at the carved details of this. It's Norman, the font, but the bowl was remodelled. Got a fleur-de-lis on there. It's got a lead bowl in it, look. So, lots of my ancestors would have been christened in that, 8 or 9 of them. There we go. John Collett, basically one of the men that he founded St Paul's School and the school that was at Stepney. We're going to check him out in a sec because we've got him in our guidebook. So we'll do that first and then we'll go to our oldest item. Here we are. The most tumultuous and bloody time in the history of the English Church. Stepney was at the very heart of things. John Collett, Dean of St Paul's and St Dunstan's, most famous vicar. He was appointed in circa 1500 and was one of the leading scholars of the New Learning from which the Reformation sprang. His father, Sir Henry Collett, twice Lord Mayor of London, built a huge and impressive moated mansion to the west of the church, Great Place. John Collett, who lived there after his father's death in 1510, was a close friend of the Dutch humanist and reformer Erasmus and Sir Thomas More. Both visited Stepney often. Within 15 years of Collett's death, Great Place, where once scholarly notions had been aired about improving the quality of the church's teachings, became the headquarters of a much more real attack on the church, the dissolution of the monasteries in 1534. Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's ruthless vicar general, took a lease on part of the house and also the Adalson patronage of the church. He replaced the vicar with his own man from Stepney. The onslaught on the monasteries was orchestrated with the rector, Richard Layton, taking the lead, the most brutal of Cromwell's visitors. He travelled all over the country, reporting with relish on the immorality and use of superstitious relics among the religious. But there's John Colet, man that played a big role in founding St Paul's School and the school at Stepney. But look, above John Colet, Dean of St Paul's, a leading humanist divine, was vicar of Stepney between 1500 and 1504. The Stepney properties, which he inherited from his father, were given to endow St Paul's School, the management of which was committed to the Mercers Company. And left, this is what we're going to go and see now, left the canopied tomb of Sir John's father, Sir Henry, left the canopied tomb of John's father, Sir Henry, died in 1510 on the north side of the chancel. Sir Henry, a wealthy merchant who was twice Lord Mayor of London, acquired considerable property and a great mansion in Stepney. So that's what we're going to go and see in a minute. But most importantly, St Dunstan's and the origins of the church. This here is the Holy Rood. And this Holy Rood, the stone rood, much weathered and hung for centuries outside the south porch, it is now inside on the east wall behind the Virgin and St John at the foot of the cross, and the sun and moon veil their light in grief. The rood dates from the 10th century, a relict of the church built by St Dunstan. So that's that, and then these, the font we've covered, and I know the history of that, but these are sedilia, priest seats in the chancel, are early English design and date from the 13th century. They were restored in 1899 and then the year 2000. The 13th century tablet of the Annunciation is fixed to the north of the wall of the chancel. It is much worn, having been formerly outside the church on the west wall. So we've covered that, what they are, and now we're going to go and have a look at them. So we'll start with the priest's seats, which are our oldest items. Not that, sorry, our second oldest items. I want to save the best till last, you see, and it is the oldest. It's a bit too blurry for that, I'm afraid. Then we shall have a look at the tomb of Sir John Colet's father, canopied tomb, which is just there. And then the weathered stone of the Annunciation of Christ. Try and get a bit of a better view of Colet's father's tomb. Oh, that's better. There we go. That's the tomb of Colet's father. There are more tombs up on the wall, but my zoom in won't be too great on them. This one here is an interesting one, but we'll cover that. Well, we might as well cover it now, mightn't we? Because I want to save the best till last. So we're going to go into our guidebook again, because it is covered here. There we are. This one. A monument to Robert Clark, an alderman's son of Bethnal Green, who died in 1610, aged 35. His wife was the daughter of John Langton, governor of the English Company in Russia. They lived together in love and integrity almost 6 years. The monument is on the north side of the chancel, which is this one here. We're not going to be able to... Oh, it's in Latin anyway. This is them. And their fine tomb. And, as I said, I will save the best till last. You've got the beautiful ceiling and roof, and there's so much detail in this church. Like up here, what I'm going to show you now. Look. The roof beam supports the truss supports. And mirroring right on the other side, you've got one there. And that too would have been some kind of structure originally. This was added onto the church later on. This. There we go. And last but not least, because this is going to be over an hour, this one, but it's a very special church, a lot of history. I mean, you've got all the medieval stuff, the Reformation, its links to the East End. This was the early foundations of the East End, before Poplar, Limehouse, Mile End Old Town, before they got their own churches. Everyone from those places, this is where they had to come, like my ancestors. And that leads us on to, we're standing in the very spot. I'll get the marriage certificate out. Whoops. Which is here. Parish Church, Stepney, St Dunstan's, Middlesex. You've got August the 24th, 1851. Child, this is my great-great-great-grandparents, Charles Henry Lee and Sarah Sullivan. Now, she was not of full age. She was 16. Full age would have been 18 in those days. He was 19. I don't think that they had their parents' or her family's consent, because her maiden name was actually Foster, but she used her grandfather's name, Sullivan, and I know it's the right one because when she was a child, or a child in the 1841 census, as a foster, living with her parents, Joseph and Eliza, right at the bottom of the entry is the grandfather, Daniel Sullivan, that lived with them. So she's used her grandfather's name to marry without the parents' consent, and I think, and they've lied about their age. But yeah, full age, which is a lie. Bachelor, spinster. Hopefully that's true. Hopefully we're not looking at bigamists. He was a labourer. They often didn't put a woman's occupation in those days because they thought it was frightfully common. But I do know she was a servant. There we go. Father's name, Henry Lee, labourer. Residence at the time for both of them is Stepney. Now, her father's name was Joseph Foster, so she's put the right name for him there, Joseph, but her grandfather's, so his father-in-law's name, she's used Joseph Sullivan, and that's true, they were both labourers. So yeah, and the witnesses were J. Courtney and I can never work this one out, it looks like Balclua Petria X, their mark. So yeah, this spot in 1851, in August 1851, is where my ancestors, great-great-great-grandparents would have stood and taken their vows. And they moved from Stepney to what we call Canning Town and Silvertown, that area. Blackwall, they called it in those days, the bit that they lived in, and then they moved from there to Canning Town. And sadly for Charles and Henrietta, oh dear, I've sweated on that. Sadly for Charles and Henrietta, they married in 1851, they had 4 children. In 1870, Charles, who was working at the London docks, he had an accident, and it was a nasty one, I'm afraid. His job was to load along what were called trolleys, which were like wheeled carts that we'd pull along, and a lever would be pulled, and they'd fill each one with a ton of grain. Some accident somehow happened and he was buried under a ton of wheat. Taken from there to the London hospital and died, I think it was a day or two afterwards, of extreme shock. If that's something that might interest you, let me know in the comments section and I'll do a piece on his life and death certificate and all that. His burial. He had a will and life insurance in those days, which for a dock labourer was pretty good. So yeah, that's my ancestry over and done with. And don't forget all the glass was replaced after the war. And this is the Holy Rood, which links right back to St Dunstan and his church. There we are. I hope you all found that one interesting, guys and girls. Ladies and gents, rather, I should say. Give you a quick once around of the church. Again, which is a lovely old church. Hammer beam roof. And the scenes from the life of Christ, I will show you just a few of them. I've photographed each one individually and I'll put them on as a separate piece because this is going to be very, very long otherwise, this one. And we're going to be heading just over an hour with the intro piece anyway for the outside views. I'm sorry if you found this one a bit too long and boring, but it's a very interesting special church to the East End, to the sea, the navy, the docks. Big part of our history. Hope you all enjoyed and thank you very much for watching. And this is our earliest known image of St Dunstan Stepney. This is the Mercer's Company map of 1615. Now, the Mercer's Company owned quite a bit of land in the area, and St Dunstan's, as we've seen from the stained glass inside, was their guild church. 1746, and you can see at this time the bell tower still has its little turret on top, and the churchyard is much more occupied with stones and headstones, tombstones, whatever you want to call them, than it is nowadays. This is an interesting little one. It's an invitation to dine and meet stewards of Stepney, 1746. And just below, or above where my little white tag on is in the comments, are all the people that were invited to dine. So, some fairly prestigious people would have had a good dinner, I should imagine, and in the process of that would have donated a shed load of money towards parish poor. That's how things were dealt with in those days. 1755, and you can see we've still got our little turret on the bell tower, and it happily flies the red pennant, being the church known as the Church of the High Seas. Over to the right, the little house with smoke coming out of its chimney, that's the old vicarage or parsonage, long gone I'm afraid. St Dunstan Stepney, early 19th century, and the bloke sitting on one of the tombstones, if you look closely, he's got knee-length breeches and stockings on, and he's most likely a sexton or a gravedigger. St Dunstan's and All Saints Church, Stepney, 1803, painted by George Shepherd. Nice little painting this, and you can see we've still got our turret, but over to the right, the box tomb that's most prominent, we actually cover that one in my video, so that's an interesting little one. The interior of the church in 1800. I don't know if the artist has deliberately drawn it without pews. I should well imagine it would have had them by this point. Nearly all churches did. But in times long past, medieval times and things like that, churches didn't have pews. You'd have stone benches or wooden benches lined along the walls, and only the sick or elderly or frau could sit on those. Everyone else was expected to stand and kneel during the services. 1880s, and we see the church, and the turret has gone now. So between the early 19th century and the 1880s, restorations and things, the Victorians did quite a bit when they built that little octagonal building on. And the turret was taken down between early 19th century and 1880s. But over to the left you see a lost world, an old pub hotel and a very old shop, all completely wiped away during the Second World War. Interior of the church, 1930, and it doesn't look so very different to us today as it does here. I mean, up in the roof you can see the skylight windows have gone, that was taken out by the Victorians as part of the restoration, but pretty much the same. A little pour box on the back of one of the pews over to the left. The damage in this church during the war was mostly to its windows, really. There was some damage in the bell tower, and a lot of churches took their bells down during the war for obviously safety reasons and things like that. Some bells were requisitioned from churches and taken away for the war effort, and this is one of the bells of St Dunstan's, because don't forget, this church features in the Oranges and Lemons, said the bells of St Clement's nursery rhyme. When will you pay me, said the bell at Old Bailey. I do not know, said the big bell at Bow. When will that be, said the bells of Stepney. And that's part of that. But this is World War II and one of the bells being taken down. 1950s this one, and it was dated 50s question mark, so it could be a little bit earlier. You see the vicar up in the pulpit and two helpers, and I have absolutely no idea what they are doing with nets. Maggie, who works in the church, said years ago a lot of churches did have problems with birds flying in, so they might be trying to catch birds. But if anyone can tell me about what that's going on there, I'd be grateful to you. Made me curious. First Communion, St Dunstan's, 1950, and the girls girls in this picture kneeling for the blessing from the bishop for their First Communion. 1950s, and we see by this time the restoration has occurred around the window and of the glass, new glass, and the tablet of St Dunstan's church is at the bottom. Not very different view to what we see today, is it? This little niche, we see it in the 1950s. This is where that triptych is when I went into that little bit, and over to the left bit inside that room is the Roll of Honour and things like that. But obviously in the 1950s, the triptych that was rescued from St Augustine's and Settle Street, that wasn't here then. We see what was there before it, and in the 50s, by the 50s, the door has already gone. Nice view, 1950s, and I've deliberately put the date over the radiator to try and cover that. That radiator's gone now. And you see just above the radiator the memorial window for the sailors of the Second World War. This view, 1950s, but really it looks exactly the same pretty much today. The only difference is the cross wasn't on the high altar. That when I came and photographed and videoed, that only is brought out for services, which was handy really, because it allowed us a good view of St Dunstan's stone, the Holy Rood. 1950s view again inside the chapel, and this is our last view, and this is the organ. And as you can see here, it was originally at the other end of the church to the left of the high altar. After the war it was moved up to same side but right up the other end, and the keyboard looks very different and stuff, but it is the same organ, just restored and made better. And as in these days they were still hand pumped. This organ was installed with electric action in 1970, so come the 1950s some poor beggar was still having to stand there and pump these organs. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that little venture into the past. Thanks very much for watching.